April 14th, 1912. The North Atlantic Ocean stretched endlessly in every direction. Dark, cold, silent. Above, the sky was clear. Thousands of stars burned quietly in the night. And cutting through that stillness was a ship, massive, bright, alive with music and laughter. The RMS Titanic, a symbol of human ambition and human confidence. It was said to be unsinkable, a ship so advanced, so carefully engineered that nothing in nature could bring it down. But in just a few hours, that belief would vanish beneath the ocean. The Titanic wasn't just a ship, it was a floating world. Built by the White Star Line, it was the largest moving object ever created at the time. Over 882 feet long, towering decks and interiors more luxurious than most hotels on land. First-class passengers dined under crystal chandeliers. They walked grand staircases, relaxed in smoking rooms, and enjoyed meals prepared by top chefs. But just a few decks below, third-class passengers lived very differently. Families were packed into small cabins. Many were immigrants, leaving everything behind for the hope of a better life in America. Over 2,200 people were on board. Different lives, different dreams, all heading in the same direction. On April 10th, 1912, the Titanic left Southampton. It made stops in Cherbourg and Queenstown, and then began its journey across the Atlantic. At first, everything went exactly as planned. By April 14th, the Titanic was deep in the North Atlantic. The sea was unusually calm, almost too calm. Throughout the day, wireless operators received message after message. Ice warnings. Ships ahead reported drifting icebergs, some massive in size. One message described a field of ice stretching for miles. But on board the Titanic, these warnings did not cause panic. In fact, many passengers never even heard about them. The ship continued at near full speed, fast for such dangerous conditions. Some warnings were delivered to the bridge, others were delayed, and a few were never passed on at all. Because the wireless system wasn't just used for navigation, it was also used to send personal messages for passengers, and that night those messages took priority. Meanwhile, the Titanic kept moving forward, straight into the dark. At 11:40 p.m., high above the deck, in the crow's nest, a lookout scanned the horizon. There were no binoculars, only his eyes adjusting to the darkness. Then suddenly he saw it, a shape, dark, silent, enormous, an iceberg. The warning reached the bridge instantly. Orders were shouted. The engines began to turn, engines reversed. But it was too late. There was no dramatic crash, no explosion. Just a long, slow, grinding sound as the iceberg tore along the side of the ship, below the waterline, out of sight, but not without damage. At first, many passengers felt nothing. Some noticed a slight vibration. Others did not even realize anything had happened. But deep inside the ship, water was already rushing in. Engineers moved quickly to inspect the damage. One compartment, then another, then another. 5 compartments were flooding. The Titanic had been designed to survive 4, but not 5. Water spilled over from one compartment into the next like a chain reaction, unstoppable. The ship's designer walked the decks, silently calculating. He already knew the Titanic would sink within 2 hours, maybe less. And suddenly, everything changed. Up on deck, passengers were told to put on life jackets. Some laughed, others refused. After all, this was the Titanic. The idea that it could sink felt impossible. Lifeboats were uncovered, but there was a problem. There were not enough. Only enough for about half the people on board. At first, boats were lowered half empty. People hesitated. They did not want to leave the safety of the ship for the freezing darkness below. But time was slipping away. Slowly, the reality began to set in, and fear began to grow. The front of the ship sank lower. Water crept across the decks. The angle became impossible to ignore. Now people understood. This was real. Panic spread. Families were separated. Voices cried out in the darkness. Some tried to find lifeboats. Others searched for loved ones. And through it all, the band kept playing. Soft music drifted into the cold night air. A final attempt to bring calm to chaos. The bow disappeared beneath the ocean. The stern rose high into the air. People clung to anything they could. Then the unthinkable happened. The ship began to break. The Titanic split in two. The front half vanished beneath the surface. The back half lingered for just a moment before slipping into the darkness. At 2:20 a.m., the Titanic was gone. The ocean returned to silence, but now it was filled with voices. Over 1,500 people were left in the freezing water. Most would not survive more than a few minutes. The lifeboats, too few, too far, could only watch. Hours later, rescue finally arrived, but for many, it was too late. Buried far below the surface, the Titanic rested. A frozen moment in time. A reminder that no matter how powerful humanity believes it is, nature always has the final say. And even today, over a century later, the story of the Titanic still echoes across the ocean, not just as a tragedy, but as a warning. What do you think really caused the Titanic disaster?